Just a quick addition to the snowflake video. As you'll recall, we created the shape of a paper snowflake and then used a series of mirroring and fusion operations to virtually unfold it into the full design. I did it that way to emulate the process of making a paper snowflake, but as with many things in CAD, there is more than one way. I'll start back at the 1/8 of a snowflake. For the first step of unfolding, we're really obligated to use mirroring from the part workbench. The reason for that is that we have an asymmetric design. The two edges do not match up. Just like before, I'll select the cut and mirror and one plane on the cut and click OK. Again, open the mirror and select it and the cut inside and fuse. Now we have a symmetrical tile. The vertical and horizontal are identical. So now I'm going to create a polar array from the Lattice 2 workbench. Select the array, change the count to 4 and the radius to 0. Now select the snowflake tile, the array, and populate array with copies, and there's our snowflake. After all of this, I had just one more problem. The intricate cutouts in the snowflake did not want to stick to the bed. When I 3D printed, the corners of the diamond-shaped cutouts kept lifting off of the bed and trying to form a glob on the nozzle. In such a case, an extreme measure would be to configure the slicer to create a raft. But in my experience, it's often hard to separate a print from its raft, especially if the print itself is in any way intricate as the snowflake is. So I decided to build a raft into the design and put it just under the snowflake itself. Hide the snowflake itself and unhide the blank snowflake, which is just the shape of our folded paper. As you can see, I did finally go back and rename all of the objects in the model to find things easily. Create a sketch on the XY plane and bring in the edges of the 1/8 of the snowflake as external geometry. Using the polyline tool, trace around the shape. Close the sketch. Select the new sketch and extrude it to 0.2 millimeters, which is the layer thickness that I'm printing in. Now, like the snowflake itself, we must mirror the raft. So select the extrusion and mirror, and select the plane to mirror along. It's a pretty thin extrusion, so I'm having to zoom way in order to get it to select that plane, but it will select. Click OK. Like with the snowflake itself, open up the mirror, select the mirror and the extrusion, and fuse. We already have a polar array, so select the fusion and the polar array and populate with copies. This is our raft. We have a choice. We can either select the snowflake and the raft and fuse, or simply select both of them together to export as a step file for the slicer. The result will be the same either way. Finally, I'd like to add a ring to the snowflake so it can be hung on a tree. So create a primitive torus. 2 millimeters as the major radius and 1 millimeter as the minor radius. Select the torus in the model tree, and in the data pane bring up the mapping dialog. Select the line defining the point at the end of one of the diagonal arms. Perfect just as it is. Close the dialog. You'll note that the torus protrudes below the bottom of the snowflake, but that's okay. When it's loaded into the slicer, the bottom of the torus will be below the plane of the print bed, and so it will simply be left off. The only side effect is that Prusa Slicer will say the object is sinking. That's just fine. Now, once it's printed, it can either be left as is, which produces a pretty nice effect itself, or you could use a belt sander with a really fine grit paper and just sand off the raft. If you do that, please be sure to wear gloves. There's really not much more to say about the snowflakes now, so I'll just show you the results as printed. The first one is exactly as I've shown you. And here's one that I made a little larger by changing the construction square in the very first sketch to 100 by 100 millimeters. Parametric design is nice. Everything else just fell into place, and all I needed to do was make a couple more cutouts to fill in the extra space. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video or found it useful, please like, subscribe, and share. If there's anything you'd like to see covered here, please let me know in the comments below.